everyone, I'm Cinnamon Cooney, your Art Sherpa, and today's a very exciting day. I'm going to show you how you can paint at home for yourself a watercolor painting from this teacup reference. This is a really gorgeous teacup reference. I like it so much. I like the flowers. I like the surface of the water. Now, painting from a photo reference in watercolor is its own unique challenge, and I really love being able to show you how we break this down and how we get these gorgeous, loose, wonderful watercolor paintings using photo references. The goal being that someday you'll be able to do this on your own from your own trip photos and your own life photos. To help me do this is my husband, John.
Hello.
He's going to make sure that the cameras are pointing at the techniques I'm demonstrating and the colors I'm mixing. He's going to be watching the chat. We are streaming from 2 locations, so you can pick either platform that works better for you. They're both free. They're all free. There's no link that ever is going to require your credit card unless you're signing up for Patreon, or but nothing for the videos.
Mm-hmm.
So good to know that, right? Are you guys ready to do this one today? I'm really excited.
Oh, I'm so excited about this. This is a really pretty little teacup.
What you see taped here on my 140 pound, I'm working with 140 pound watercolor paper. I like Artistico. I like very much love Fabricano as a paper company, and they do a nice block. It's a really gorgeous block, and that's going to keep my paper from wrinkling. 140 pound cold pressed watercolor paper. If you're just starting out and you're like, what do I have to buy? I would highly recommend that. It makes a big difference in your watercolor experience. Now, colors, I try to use the same colors from week to week to week, and John might have to move me over a little bit so you can see them as I call them out. This one right here is Payne's Gray, the PG. NAY is Nickel Azo Yellow. HYM is Hansa Yellow Medium. PR is Pyrrole Red. QM is Quinacridone Magenta. UB is Ultramarine Blue. PB is Phthalo Blue. OP is Opera Pink. TPO is Transparent Pyro Orange. BU.
You're going to have to slide that over just a little bit. It's just off the screen to your left. Oh, perfect. There we go.
Okay. So I'll just have to slide everything over a bit.
No problem.
All right. And
there we can see the edge of it now.
Okay. See? That's what he do. All right. And we've got our paper towel between here and our round brush. So BU is Burnt Umber. QG is Quinacridone Gold. I use this instead of Burnt Sienna because it's just got a little extra something in watercolor. And then PGR is Phthalo Green, which I probably could have just done PG, but I just went all the way for the GR so you would know. Now, I don't necessarily use every color, every class, but these are the colors that I use, and I'm using them for the year. That way, the classes that you come to, if you can invest in your version of these, then you can build up over time. You can also just use whatever, like say you have a Crayola palette, just use what's on your palette that's closest to the color that I have. So if it's an orangey red, you grab whatever orangey red you have. It's a pinky color, grab whatever pinky color you have, right? So that will work especially with watercolor. The traceables are free on the website at theartsherpa.com. So you go to the traceable tab and you can just download the traceable and print it out. And then what I do is I rub the back with graphite and I tape it down and I trace over the lines, and that's going to make a transfer. And I'm going to finish this one up here while we're talking. All right, so you can see I just go over the lines. I like to use a colored pencil or pen. And the reason for that is that it lets you know where you've been. And then every time you use it, you can change the colors. Now, interestingly enough, I'm going to do, besides this little stem here, I'm going to do a really cool technique over here that's going to do soft, diffused effects and then hard, crisp effects, which you guys are going to really like. So I'm going to just tell myself, generally, I have a bunch of little impatiens, and they're going to take up about this much space because I'm going to wet out that area like you do and paint that out. I'm also going to tell myself, oh, hey, there's a little bit of this here. That's where I'm at with that, right? If you are unsure of the structure of flowers, you can go into this and make your own structural lines, and I did provide those for you here. You could use those if you want. You can see that the transfer is light, and it's light enough not to hurt the final image, and that's an important thing. I have a lot of different brushes. If you watched my Instagram, and if you haven't followed my Instagram, please do the Art Sherpa over on Instagram. When we were at the event, we were using the Raphael SoftAqua Imitation Squirrel. This is kind of like a bright square. And I really love this brush. We had so much fun with it. I did a live, so you could see it, like my first impression as it was happening. And we actually gave this and the other watercolor brush to the attendees of the retreat. They loved it so much, and they were like, I can't find it. I can't find it. We're like, oh, just take it.
I think that what it was is that they were claiming them, and we were just allowing them to claim, because they were like, we gave. Oh yeah, we did, but they were like, when they got them, they were like, we don't have to give this back.
They didn't really want to relinquish them, but we were going to give it to them anyways.
But they were super pleased too. Everyone who's gotten these has enjoyed them.
They're really amazing. I also have the number 14 Raphael SoftAqua in a round. This is a 10 and this is a 14. Brush sizes are not universal across even brush companies, let alone across different lines. So you always want to kind of look at the size of a brush in comparison to objects that you can understand, like my hand. Gives you an idea of scale, in relationship to nails and things. These are aside here. I've got this here, and I have my Sippy Sippy, which today, and this is not sponsored, I don't know who these people are, is Calpico, which is this really cool drink from the sushi bar at our grocery store. And I like the one with aloe vera chunks in it, and I also very much like these. And this one here, oh man, it tastes so good. That's my share with you today. This is strawberry. This is like a soda, but it's non-carbonated. Which, if you don't like carbonation, that could be nice. Okay. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to begin my soft effect, and I'm going to use my square.
Kathy says, Kathy was like, I love those brushes. I was very happy to keep it.
Hi, how are you doing? Did you have fun? Tell everybody how much fun you had. We have one spot left for July, and we're having a meetup on Sunday 1 to 3 at the Shawnee Golf Resort, in a golf resort in the Pocono. You can find the event on Facebook. You should probably follow my Facebook page too. I'm going to get my brush a little bit wet, right? And I'm going to come here and kind of wet out an area. Now, when you're wetting out paper, guys, right, you don't want fish to be able to swim in it. No, that's not the goal, is it? But you need it to be wet enough for the paint to diffuse. Watercolor paint works like this. The color goes where the water is. So if you have water someplace, it's going to softly diffuse into that place. All right, that's what it's going to want to do. Got this all here. So it's very lightly damp. You can see the sheen to it. Let me get this brush, and I'm going to grab some Opera Pink, which is one of my favorite colors, and some transparent Pyrrole Orange. Oops, I got a little too much on there. What that was is I washed out my palette. And so some of the paint resoftened. The paint can be reused again and again and again. And so sometimes when you clean your palette, it will resoften. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to come here and make kind of little soft, square little shapes. See these soft little values here? And what's going to happen is that this is going to diffuse into the water, this wet area. So when we come back and do like maybe little harder strokes and stuff to do more defined flowers, this will have this beautiful diffused effect. And I really like it. I'm going to rinse out really, really well. I'm going to come over here. This is Nickel Azo Yellow, one of my favorite yellows ever. Look at that yellow. And you can see I've wet it out on the palette. I rinse out my brush. Here's some tricks. You're always controlling the amount of color in your brush. And so there's a lot of trips to the water cup, to the paper towel, to the palette to get a nice load. And I'm going to add just some little spots of yellow here at the, isn't that just pretty on its own? This color isn't dark, and I know that it's going to lighten as the paint dries. I'm going to rinse out. I'm going to put my square brush down for the moment. So can you guys see how that happened? How we wet out this loose area where we had done the outline from the traceable. Just wet enough that the paper had a sheen to it, but not puddling. And then we used a very light mix of transparent Pyrrole Orange and Opera Pink together, making little kind of square abstract strokes. And then we came back with a little Nickel Azo Yellow to do some pops of color in there. All right, I'm going to get my brush wet. This is my round brush. These are all imitation squirrel. These are not actual squirrel. They're imitating being squirrel. And I'm going to make sure it's pretty rinsed out. And I'm going to also wet inside the cup, which means I will come around the flower. I'm going to leave the flower. I'm going to take a little bit of the Quinacridone Gold out. I think it's just a wonderful tea color. It just is. That's just how it is on its own on a good day. It just is a good tea color. I'm going to come kind of almost to the edge, but not all the way to the edge. See how I left a little bit of white there? And I'm going to brush this around, allowing it to flow into the tea area. And the way that it goes into the cup mimics the way that fluids look. This is, I think, one of the things about watercolor that makes it a great joy, is especially when you're doing any kind of fluid work, any kind of ocean work, any kind of soft work, because it says, oh, I got you. I'm going to add a little darker color a couple places. I'm just touching right there. And I'm allowing it to do this blue. I'm letting it go. Like I'm Elsa. Look right along the edge of that flower. Isn't that great? Mm-hmm. But I'm not taking out the little pops of white. And that's because on water, there are white areas, aren't there? There's reflection. This is an important thing to learn how to do in watercolors. How do I get those little areas of reflection? Now you can go back with white gouache. You can go back with white acrylic paint. You can go back with white colored pencil or wax, like a wax pencil at the end. You can take something that's opaque and white and go over the top of the watercolor to create reflections. And that's okay. That's perfectly fine. This is a good thing to practice, though. Mm-hmm. Right? It's a good thing to practice. And remember, if you dry out your brush, I'm drying it out while on my watercolor, you can always come back and also lift back. See how we're doing?
Yes.
You can lift back something as well. If you lose something that you wanted, you can use the brush while the paint is still wet like a vacuum. And you can come back with paper towel or sponge or some other type of medium and get that effect too. Now I'm going to come along my cup edge here and make sure that this is a crisp line. I like that line quite a lot. And I'm going to get out a little bit of my Ultramarine Blue and some of my Burnt Umber. And together these make a fairly nice gray. It's a little different than the Payne's gray, which is super powerful. That's a super powerful color. You know, you want to use that when you need it. But if you just need a soft gray, and especially one that maybe has a little bit of a lightness to it, you definitely want to go this way. I'm going to come here. And now the paper is dry. And because the paper is dry, I can really control with my brush very much where the paint goes. I'm going to just brush in a little bit of gray here, kind of controlling that. Definitely another little bit of gray here. I want to leave some kind of white area in the center here, and that's because we're going to do a very loose, almost abstract floral there. And so I want to leave some white for that. But we let the lip of the teacup be a little white. I can always come and get a little more ultramarine blue and burnt umber. And you can see they just go great together. This is also true in acrylic, that color mix. I can put a slightly stronger color there. I can put a little bit extra there. And then where I know that there's going to be something under the teacup, can add that. Kind of stroking that around because there is a little bit under the teacup, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
When you're painting very white anything, it's just important to remember that you're painting reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the colors of what's around it. And what you see me doing is lightening up my little gray here. Especially as I'm coming around towards the lighter area of the teacup. I can, interestingly enough, maybe even get a little tiny amount of my pink. And maybe perhaps speak a little of that reflecting into the porcelain.
Now, what brand of paint are you using here?
So I'm using Sennelier, Core, Daniel Smith, M. Graham, and Holbein.
So it's safe to say any of those you're pretty okay with?
Yeah, and in the description, I listed the brands of paint that I like.
Oh, good.
Because sometimes you'll find a color in one line and not be able to find a color in another, and you're like, you know, they're all kind of in that same price range. So sometimes you'll find a line that's like on a weird clearance, and you want to know, like, when that is on a weird clearance, that you can absolutely use it. So I like to let you guys know what's good.
And that's your Tom Lynch palette that you're using.
Yeah, I'm using a Tom Lynch palette. Now, guys, it's totally overkill.
But it's porcelain, which is why
porcelain, and that's the important part. We have, for our retreat, we have porcelain butcher trays. And, you know, obviously we have to get a grip of those for people to do watercolors. They have to be economical. I wouldn't necessarily do 30 or 40 of these.
Right.
But for myself, it's reasonable. And the thing to remember, guys, is that it's the porcelain that you're worried about, though this is a joy of the Tom Lynch anything, I think, is a joy. I like Tom Lynch everything. I'm going to make a little light lavender with my ultramarine and my little pink mixture over here. And put some kind of below the cup, just a bit coming out, a little bit of lavender. And maybe take a little bit of the lavender coming along under the bottom of the cup to kind of talk about.
So thank you to everybody out there for the super chats and the extra stars and the support
Thank you.
And love for all of our patrons. We really appreciate it.
I do appreciate it.
We do.
So you can see where we have a dry edge, guys.
Mm-hmm.
The paint is very crisp and sharp, and where it was wet and we applied wet paint or color into the wet, it's very soft and diffused, giving it that very signature watercolor look, doesn't it? Rather lovely. The signature watercolor look. Now, this feels almost dry enough to play with again. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to pull out a little of my Phthalo Green right there. I'm going to get some of my Nickel Azo Yellow, and I love them together. I think they make the most gorgeous greens. And I'm going to come here and very carefully make sort of little shape of a stem. And begin the little thought of a leaf. This is the beginnings. We haven't done the flowers themselves yet. We're just talking about the little pops of green that maybe we're seeing peeking out.
Yep.
And I can come in and get some Quinacridone Gold and some burnt umber and almost even some Pyrrole Red. Pyrrole Red in watercolor is what I use instead of cadmium. And you can use Pyrrole Red instead of cadmium in acrylic paint. It's no cheaper, but it has no cadmium pigment in it. That was not something that I knew until later in my art journey. Which is why we did not start out with just Pyrrole Red.
Interesting.
No, because you're always learning. I'm going to take a little bit of this and kind of edge these leaves. Can you see where we're doing? A little loosely sketched stem, and we're going to edge these little leaves.
Every time I think I know something. The universe says, let me show you how little you actually know about that.
Yeah, it is the universe's favorite thing to do. Cause you to question, you know, what you think you know. Add a little light green to all of this. That's looking pretty good. Now back into the opera pink, which is such a fun color, and the transparent pyrrole orange. This is sort of like, you know how I love my cad red and quinacridone? This is kind of like my watercolor version of that mix. I'm going to come around and kind of almost outline this petal here. So I can loosely paint some dark petals beneath it. And you see how I kind of did the negative space that?
Yes.
Negative space is where you're painting around an object to create the object.
All right, Sherpa, are you willing to spill some tea?
I don't know. What tea am I spilling? Right. Is it
Desiree wants to know.
Oh, okay.
All right, Sherpa, is it true that one pigment blooms better than another?
Yes, it's absolutely true. Though you can control that with additives like Flow Aid or Oxgall. Some artists prefer to start with a very stable paint like Holbein, which is a Japanese paint. And you'll find many of the Japanese paints will be very tight and don't travel deeply into the water. And that's because artists in Japan often prefer to have much more control over where the pigment goes. If you think about doing a single stroke to create an entire painting, you would want control. So with that paint, you would always add Flow Aid or Oxgall to change the distance in which it traveled. Core watercolor has the most Flow Aid in it. It goes everywhere. And of the core pigments, the Payne's Gray has the most flow. It has the most go. Sorry. So that's the tea that I'm spilling in our tea lesson.
Cinema is all concerned for a minute. I was going to get into something deeply controversial, like hot and cold pressed paper or something.
Oh no, I thought you were like all the stuff that I was like yelling about this morning online.
I know. I'm just giving you a hard time. Oh my gosh. But you know, oh my God. The most controversial thing we need to talk about is quinacridone.
I do try to do that because I do recognize that my controversies are probably not y'all's controversies. And then also sometimes like somebody who enjoys sports.
Right.
Sometimes I am involved emotionally in things that I'm not maybe specifically playing that. It's just from the background. I get upset. Like I have an artist that I really want to collect who's getting really hit on Facebook really hard, which y'all know that's happened to me. So I can relate to it. And painting around the negative space of the flowers to create them.
Oh. Now, negative space is that empty white space.
Yeah, and I don't want to paint it all out because we have some beautiful soft bloom, and I don't want to take away all of the diffused elements of it. All right, we want to keep some. So it's like very important that we keep a little bit of it so that we can enjoy what is there. I'm adding a little bit of petals here. Isn't that great? Just, it's there. And it's clearly what it is. But with watercolor, sometimes you're strengthened by what you don't say over what you do say. Add a little yellow here. Look at that. Just beautiful and floral and open. Now, the way we did this here, we have to have some reflection of that here. Otherwise, they won't look like they're in the same painting. So it's something to be aware of when you're painting. I'm going to get back into my gray because I want a lot of control right here. And I don't want to do it wet into wet yet because I want to show a little bit of a white reflection coming along my water's edge. As you do. Sometimes. I'll come up to the edge of the cup. Not quite all the way because I want to leave a little bit of a light edge there. I mean, my pencil's there and it's about the right value, so even on its little own, and come up leaving a little bit of the porcelain, and you can see I'm getting lighter with my watercolor, so I am painting it, but it gets lighter as it comes around the corner. I'm going to add a little bit of a little brown, a little Quinacridone Gold into that side of the teacup. Sometimes you want to do that. You want to add a little drama in that side of the teacup. I'm going to go back into that color I mixed over here, which is the Quinacridone Gold, and I got a little of the Pyrrole Red into it, even the burnt umber, because that'll be a very nice kind of edge of my teacup here for like the gold leafing, because it's got some, right? Now you'll notice that I'm breaking the line, and that's because I'm going to come back with another color. To talk about that line a bit as well and soften that some. I'm going to get into my nickel Azo Yellow. And can you see how that creates a variant?
Mm-hmm.
Feels a little more like old gold leafing. Well, sort of nice. Now, I can come here and I'm going to wet out, but leave the edge of the teacup. And leave the edge of the teacup. I'm going to grab a little bit of my Ultramarine Blue and my Phthalo Blue together. Just paint loosely this space beneath the teacup. Fun.
That's so cool.
So sure, we've got a little bit of something happening. It is space in which the teacup is not just in a white field, but I like that artful nature of it. I really do. Because it's like, oh, that's lovely.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take a little of our Ultramarine Blue over here and a little of our Quinacridone Magenta. As you can see, it makes one of the best purples. And I'm going to kind of come in. We're going to speak a little bit about what could be a pattern in our china. Maybe it's a bit floral, but we're loose about it. See how we're loose about it?
Yeah.
Now, in this type of work, you can be as regimented as you choose or as loose as you choose. And I know sometimes it's easier to be tight with work sometimes than loose. I know, I get it. You know, because to paint small marks that tell a bigger story, you kind of got to really understand what in the story you have to have for it to feel like what it is. I grab some green here. Maybe add a little of that brown into the green. Little yellow. I might even get into my nickel Azo Yellow a bit. See how we're just loosely telling the story of a China pattern.
Mm-hmm.
One we can see some of, but not all of. Now I'm going to get my stronger quinacridone. And add some pops of pink. It's amazing when it happens. When it happens, it happens. You're like, wait, where did that come from? But when it happens, it totally happens. That's why I love doing this. We'll let that all have a thought.
A thought.
It needs to think about what it's done.
Mm-hmm.
A little pink there, so it kind of all feels like it goes together. Now, here in the teacup, we've got a nice pink flower. So we remember what our color was, right? Is our opera pink and our transparent pyrrole orange is our basis. I'm going to rinse out thoroughly. You could hear it. I'm going to wet the petal, but not where the little bits of stamen are going to come up. That'll stay dry. And not the edge of the teapot. I've got to be kind of careful about not getting into that. I'm going to come in and start to paint. And open so it can bloom. And that's really just to sort of make sure that this looks a bit like that. That's all we're doing. I'm going to grab a little of my gray, my ultramarine blue, and my burnt umber. Start to paint the stem. The teapot coming around. Leaving some white. And with a bit of a shadow, applying the cup. All right, and applies the cup loosely. If I want to get a darker gray, I can get a darker gray going. Put it right there where the handle and the cup meet there. And then also right here coming up the stem. Underside of the cup a bit, kind of pulling the cup and the saucer away from each other. Bring a little shadow along what is the lip. Refine that here a bit. Now I'm going to rinse out very well. I'm going to come up above all of this. Above the cup. All right. And around the flowers. I'm going to take a little of my nickel Azo Yellow again. I'm rinsing out thoroughly. Phthalo Blue and get these together. There you go. Get into almost an antique aqua. Tap out a little sort of space around. Can you see that? And what's happening is I'm letting the paint fill in some of the background space. very carefully coming around the space that defines the cup. And perhaps a little bit of the flower. And then I let it kind of get tight and open over here on this side. And you can see it goes from the bloom to that. I can get my yellow in here and even bloom that over there. Look at that. So it goes from this soft space, which is so important, to this sort of hard line space. Always dancing between those two things. Rinsey, 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 rinsey. Burnt umber. Burnt umber, quinacridone gold together. I'm going to come in and glaze. Glaze is where I take a transparent color over a dry area. And I'm going to come in and hard line. That means my edges are hard here. Some of the tea, not all of the tea. Talk about the surface of the water. Is that not almost miraculous? It's very exciting to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to paint out every magic moment, but sometimes you need to create the balance between those two things.
Right.
To find those spaces. Adding a little bit of green to the China pattern down there. Some here. So it ties in. Needs to tie in. Come here, and now it's not wet over here, so I'm kind of allowing this to have a hard edge coming out that side of the teacup. I'm going to make little lines here with my yellow and tap at the top. Just speaking to that, I might get some of my Quinacridone Gold. Come back, and where the ellipse is, help define that ellipse.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm doing? A little opera pink and transparent pyrrole orange. Add a little glaze over it. That works because this is dry. Oh. See, so now we have a flower in the teacup. You know, that looks really lovely. Create some depth. Around the flower. So that it has a little contrast, which it would. Because it would cast a little shadow in the tea. Just a little bit of fun. Tap out a little.
Really beautiful.
Just enjoyable for me to do. hopefully enjoyable for you guys to do too. Pull some pink into that stem. And make sure there's a complete set of flowers there. And now you've got a really lovely little watercolor, you know, that's happening for you. Take my Quin and my little marks there to talk about those flowers. That's how we get there. Got a little bit of purple. A little bit of good turn on the cup. The trick will always be figuring out when you have what you need. And when it's time to go. And that's what it always is. I'm going to get a little of my purple here. Maybe a little darker than that. And just add a bit of a shadow under the cup. Maybe under the flower a bit. Just a little touch.
Yeah.
Just a little tiny touch. And then, you know, you've got a sign. I've got this Corel. It's just got a nice point on it, so I'm going to use it to sign today. This is one of the, if you went to the retreat, this was one of the classes. So I told everybody that there would be a lesson.
Yes.
Just because here's what, you know, when you come to a live event, I don't want people to feel like there's a speed in painting.
Right.
And so this lets everyone sort of find their own pacing and still complete their project. Have that great in-person experience and then also painting experience. Do you love that?
That's just amazing.
I'm really happy with that. I'm actually like excited. Like sometimes I'm like, I got to change out the thumbnail. But in this particular case, I'm actually excited to change out the thumbnail. I really like the little teacup. I think it's very happy. It's very indicative of like what we expect out of watercolor and the types of things that we're trying to do and play with. Stuff to remember, preserve the white. The paper is your white. You can always go back and put it back, but it's good to practice that now. Play with the idea of soft spaces versus where there are hard lines. That's really kind of in watercolor, I think, where the most magic can happen is how you go, this is a hard edge, this is a soft edge, and how you control that. We'll be back in 3 days with a very nice, simple blue ocean. I think it's something everybody's been wanting to do, and we'll do a little, we're going to use liquid masking agent to get some beach frisket and do a really fun little blue, sky blue ocean where I want to be on vacation. Wherever you guys want to be on vacation. I don't know. Wherever you guys want to be on vacation. Follow the Instagram page, the Art Sherpa. Go by and follow. I do fun stories. We got reels over there. We got cute posts. I may eventually even start putting up some of the watercolors over on Instagram. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. And I want to see you and an easel really soon. Bye-bye.